Well, welcome everybody. Here we are at week 9 of our 10 reasons why. So we're really getting towards the end. We're hurtling through them.
Unbelievable. We're almost there.
It's crazy, isn't it, Adam? Crazy journey. And tonight today, whatever, I don't know what time it is, we are talking about beating burnout.
Beating burnout. I love beating burnout. Just, the pace of life and just adapting to just the ongoing demands of life.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
And Adam, I know this was something that was kind of close to your heart because you don't do maybe one of the easiest professions.
No.
And it would maybe
not quite
be an area where, it's challenging. You want to tell people about, I know if people have heard podcasts before, they maybe know what you do, but if somebody's just tuning in for the first time tonight, they maybe don't know what you do and why you feel you can speak into this particularly.
Yeah, so I'm a social worker, and I always feel funny when I tell people I'm a social worker because the preconceived ideas of what I do. But it is a highly demanding job. The turnover of staff is like you wouldn't believe. Staff who get burnt out because it's just never-ending demands. Yeah. So working in frontline social work, children and families, the stereotypical social worker, what I do, it's just the pace is relentless. There's always something to do. There's always someone to speak to. There's always a child to go and see. And it is relentless. And I see the impact of it on not the families I work with, I don't mean that, but the staff that I work with and the people that I work around. You see the ongoing demands, the never-ending pace, and actually it results in people getting burnt out, just physically, emotionally, totally exhausted. Yeah,
because if you think about it, it's not necessarily just the pace, but it's the types of situations
the
that
emotional
they're having
burden
to deal
of it all.
with.
Absolutely, the situations that you deal with, the rawness of families and the vulnerabilities and abuse and all sorts of things that you face. So you're not just dealing with a high volume of stuff, but as you say, the situations,
the type of work,
of work that you find yourself in. Emotionally draining, physically draining, and people doing that every single day for months and months and years, it causes them to burn out and just to be totally fatigued. So I'm passionate about it because I've been there for 8 years and
you're still going?
I'm still going by the grace of God. I am where I am. But, I'm still going and haven't experienced that.
Yeah.
So I feel I can really speak into it.
Fantastic. So if we were to, because sometimes it's like, we say all these words and we've kind of described it a little bit, but, if you were to try and describe what burnout actually looks like or give us a bit of a definition for it, if some people are going like, what exactly do they mean by that? Can you give us a description?
So burnout really is it's exhaustion in a physical sense or in an emotional sense or in your motivation, and usually it's in and around the result of like prolonged stress or being in a certain situation for far too long. It's usually frustration when you're in that process for a long time in the work capacity, but it can be that feeling of energy depletion where you're depleted completely in your energy, you're completely exhausted, your mental state is that it results in cynicism, negativity, because you've been in that same situation, such as work or a family situation, and you've been playing a role for a very long time and it's not changing, and it's Groundhog Day, day after day after day, and that's burnout, where you get to that point where you're just completely exhausted. Is this ever going to change? How will I get through this? And so a lot of the research is done in a work context, but it's not solely related to a work context. You can find it whatever role you play in life, but it's influenced by the pace and the demands of life.
Absolutely. I always think of it as like there's nothing left in the tank. I think that's at times how I've described it, or I've had other people describe it. It's like all natural resources gone.
Nothing left to give.
And there's nothing left to draw from.
That's right.
It's just I'm basically at empty. So, do you think the pace of life is getting faster? Because, is this just sort of a modern day thing, or have we always struggled with these things?
Yeah, I think there's always been demands placed on people for sure in work and in family and in life, but I think it is getting faster. I think the world and life is getting so much faster. I mean, I think if you look the last 150 years, how things have changed, such as communication, transport, these things have developed at an exponential rate. The changes in the world, it's actually quite crazy. So the internet, it comes along. Social media is a massive thing now. So if you think about communication, everything is so instantaneous now. So take social media as a prime example. We have now gone from sending letters to one another as a means of communication. Not that I'm actually old enough that I did that, but you know, you send.
No, tell me you're
do you know what I mean?
joking.
I was born with Facebook, but you know, like, so it's
Seriously?
No, I'm only joking.
No.
I'm a 90s child, you know. So it's like, we used to do things like that, but now it's a case of you get your approval and your relationships and your communication through likes and comments and shares, which are instantaneous. Every second you can speak to someone on the other side of the world. So we're used to getting reward, dopamine hits in our brain instantaneously, and that pace is replicated throughout the way we communicate with each other. And I think our attention span is totally changed as well.
It's frightening, isn't it? Because I had this conversation with my son Ben, who he produces like reels for Instagram, and he was even talking to me when we were doing like YouTube videos, and he's like, "But Mum, that's completely the wrong style because everything needs to be almost like syncopated." I would say it's all cut all the time, which I find really irritating. It's almost like they're talking and then they cut it and they cut it, and
everything needs to be short, snappy. You've got to get the information as quickly as possible, and that replicates it whenever we're in our work and our family. We want things as quickly as possible. So if you look at social media now, videos have gone from minutes and minutes on end. YouTube videos to now, there used to be then a minute and a half, then now they're usually a minute, now 30 seconds, and now there's a thing, reels and shorts, where it's like 6 to 8 seconds is
that's
like
crazy.
I think that's roughly the average of a YouTube short or a reel, because it's like, get the information as quick as possible, get the dopamine hit as quick as possible. Everything's got to be as fast as possible.
And we don't, because I know we've talked on the podcast about the work that Caroline Leaf does. For me, it was fascinating to see, actually, she uses this example where she gets the husband to come up on stage one time, and she was saying, telling him to just keep taking a bite of an apple and take another bite, take another bite, take another bite, and almost like he's choking. I love him. But she was showing like, whenever we're doing that, that's what we do to our brains when we scroll, because each time we look at something, we're getting our brain to take in information, and then so that we look at something else and and that sense of we're overfeeding ourselves, and our minds aren't designed to cope with that. We're almost bombarding them
to be able to process it. Your brain just can't do it that quickly. It's like multitasking as well. I mean, how many people watch the TV or they're on their laptop while trying to work or do something else? Multitasking's a myth. Like we actually can't do it. It's what happens is you constantly jump from your brain thinking about this, then your brain thinking about that, then that, then that, then that, and that just, it's not actually focusing on one thing. Your brain just doesn't know which way to work. But that's the way we operate, is to jump from one thing to the next. And I see that in social work. It's you deal with this call, you deal with the police, then you're in a school, then you're in court, then you're writing a report, then you've got to deal with the emotional draining situation that you were just in an hour ago. And that just causes physical reactions in people, stress and burnout. That's
because we're actually not designed to cope with all of those things.
That's right.
Coming at us all. We're not superhuman. And actually, you know, but I think sometimes we're afraid to say, like, hold on a minute, this is a bit too much, or I just need a bit of time for myself, or because it can almost be seen as a thing of weakness. Like, seriously. You're
absolutely right. We wear busyness like a badge of honor. Do you know, like, the busier I am, the more things I do in my life, the more balls that I'm juggling, the more plates I'm spinning, then the more successful, and the more God's going to use me, and the more things I'm doing, and the more He'll bless me. And there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to have a pace of life, that operating from rest, where burnout doesn't touch you. But the world doesn't know how to deal with it, because they think the more I do, the more I am.
Absolutely. And I mean, do you personally find at times that you're slipping? Because I know for myself, you know, I've read research, I love listening to all this stuff, and yet I still struggle at times to slow my pace down. You know, the multitasking thing is something that I find myself doing, like in the mornings, just racing to get things done, and then feeling really proud of myself if I have got those things done, and like, oh, well done, Penny, you managed to do this, as if like, go girl, weren't you great for doing all that? As opposed to, why did I really rush? Am I not really trusting, Lord, that I'll get done what needs to be done?
That's right.
So for you, Adam, are there some things where you find yourself?
I think there's practical examples that I'm sure nobody else who's listening to this does whatsoever. But, you know, thinking of sticking to the speed limit, like, you know, that's literally something that people feel. I'm sure not everybody does it at all. Sticking to the speed limit is the one we feel like we have to rush, we have to go quicker, we have to go faster. Whether it's joining the the shortest queue in the shop.
Oh my, you would never do that.
Never. I am patient. I can wait with joy. I think Joyce Meyer used to say something like that. I used to quote it or something. But we're always joining the shortest queue. We're trying to multitask. We wake up first thing in the morning. We check our phone. We look for that dopamine hit where we get a feel good, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, whatever, a video that we watch, and it's just again instantaneous. And I always have the pull to do those things. You wake up, you want to watch something. You wake up, you want to see someone's liked something, someone's done something, and you get that shortcut to dopamine hit, but it just reinforces you want it again, you want the pace to keep going. So there's always the pull to be like that.
Yeah,
always. Rushing in an airport, that's another one. I can't actually fathom how people can rush in an airport when they're there about 4 hours before their flight's there. But everybody has this ingrained panic of
quick.
Flight's gonna go.
You see what gate it is, and then you
see what gate
race.
it is, and all of a sudden, just because the gate's announced, you think that means the flight door's closing, but it's actually not true. You've got another 5 hours to
wait. Your
wait.
seat's allocated anyway, so you don't need to get to the front of the queue.
100%. Yeah. So there's always rush. Everybody feels I've got to do something faster. I've got to get there sooner, and we all do it.
Okay, so what? What hope do we have then? How can we, as believers, find a different way? And what does the word tell us? Yeah,
there's a better pace. Do you know? I think whenever I think of God and where He's at, it says it's Isaiah. I'll read it here. It's Isaiah 40. Verse 28 to 31, it says, "Do you not know, have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth." And we'll know these verses. It says that He will not grow tired or weary, and His understanding no one can fathom. And then these are the bits that people will really know. He gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary. Young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They'll soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. There's a better way. And I always remind myself with these verses as well that God doesn't get tired. He doesn't grow tired or weary. I get tired. I am burdened by the demands, the never-ending demands of work and family and stress. But God doesn't actually get tired. So for me to get more strength and to adopt a better pace in life, it's not about getting my own strength. It's about going to God who never gets tired and reminding myself actually what's the most important thing here. I think it's a quote. It's John Mark Comer. I think he says that the solution to an overbusy life is not more time. Yeah. It's about simplifying your life around what really matters. Yeah. And for me, that's what these verses remind me of. What really matters in these moments is I go to God to get my strength to deal with the demands of the day.
Yeah. That's an interesting quote, isn't it? Because I think that's what we all think is the answer. If we just had a few more hours in the day,
we'll do more.
Yeah. Absolutely. But human nature is just going to be able to squeeze more into that.
That's
and
right.
God knows that, that isn't the answer. So this verse, it talks about, why does God use eagles as an example? What is it about? Because there's nothing by accident. Okay,
yeah,
so
eagles are great, and I'm not some creepy bird watcher. I don't actually watch birds, but
I thought it could have been one of your hobbies.
No.
You're always up Scrabble Tower.
I'm up Scrabble Tower,
not
but
with the binoculars.
I'm not looking birds. I'm not a weirdo. But eagles are fascinating, right? So they operate at higher altitudes than other birds, but actually what they do is in the middle of the storm, they use the wind, the thermal updraft the wind rises up, and they use it to get higher and higher and higher. But they do it by conserving their energy. Other birds flap around like crazy, but the eagle, as it says, will soar on wings like eagles. They fly above the storm, but they use the power of the air. And they conserve energy. They have a good skeletal structure and things like that, but they use the power of the air. They use the power of their situation to rise high above it. And actually, for me, that pace is just, I love that, because you're not seeing an eagle flapping like crazy to get above the storm. Yeah. And the wonderful thing is, and we'll probably come into some of this as well about storms, is the eagle actually uses the storm to get above the storm. I think that's fascinating, because if the winds aren't going crazy, then the eagle can't get as high. So I think God's making no mistakes in these verses. He talks about that. When you're tired, when you're weary, when you've got so much going on, use that by going to God, get fresh strength, and He'll rise you. You'll be raised above it. It's brilliant. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I mean, I know, I think Andrew's maybe alluded to this on some of the podcasts, and we've talked about this before. You are a gym lover. Isn't that right? You love the gym. And I think Andrew might have taken the mickey a few times about how you're all into rest and recovery. So you'll do
Yes,
like
yes, he has.
exercises, but then actually he's always like sort of casting aspersions of like, how much exercise are you doing, Adam?
Yes,
Because
he makes jokes that I do very little in the gym. It's
yes,
actually the jokes
because
he
all
makes.
this resting that you're doing. But explain about this, because it's actually quite interesting, isn't it? How our bodies are designed, how our muscles grow,
it's
and the process that our bodies go through.
The process physically of how you manage in the gym. So whenever you lift weights, so I'll not nerd out here, but whenever you, and I am kind of,
promise.
Here we go, buckle up, viewers and listeners, it's going to be great. So what happens is in the gym, whenever you lift weights, there's a stress on your body, okay? So what happens is you damage the muscle, so micro tears in the fibers and things like that. But the growth itself doesn't come from the lifting of the weights, doesn't come from the damage. The actual growth, when your muscle then repairs, it repairs when you rest.
Okay.
It's the days after. That's why whenever you go and you hit a certain body part in the gym, let's say you're going to lift weights on your arms, you don't go the next day and lift weights on your arms again. You rest for 48, 72 hours, depending on what you've done. And that's where it grows. Yeah. When you rest, when you recover, when you eat a lot of food, that's when they grow. It's a dream life. Do you know what I mean? Go to the gym and just eat all around you. Like that's and that's what happens. They grow then.
Yes.
So the growth is in the resting. It's not in the damage. Which usually people think I lift weights, then they grow. No, it's in the resting. Yeah. So I think that's brilliant. Just again, I think even basically physically, do you know, when you say people have got a lot going on, you say get a good night's sleep, rest and recover, and people's mindset changes. Do you know? So physically, you can't underrate that. It's so important to do it. Yeah. But yeah, in the gym, I just love that, and you get signs if you're overtraining, if you're training too hard. You will have like decreased performance in the gym. Your weightlifting won't be as successful. You'll be exhausted. You're susceptible to injury. You'll get fatigue. So these things happen when you're doing too much and you're not resting enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's brilliant.
I know for us, when we're in the business, when we're kind of coaching people, and often we're working with people who are working extremely long hours, and it's almost like they get into that cycle of, well, do you know what, there's so much on in the week, I'll just start, if I check my emails on a Sunday night, then I feel prepared for the week ahead. And you know, if I just go back onto the laptop each evening just for half an hour, then it means I've got a head start on the next day. And they start to convince themselves that they're more productive if they give more time. But actually then it's more and more and more and more time, and actually the amount of hours they're putting in, when they start to step back and look at it, they're actually becoming less productive.
That's right.
Because they can't give their best in their normal work day because they've just become exhausted. Yeah. And that lengthened work day then, and not allowing that time for rest, means they're less focused.
That's right.
The work's of a poorer quality, and they're not enjoying it anymore because it doesn't seem to be any separation between work time and rest time, and the whole work-life balance.
Absolutely.
It's kind of gone out
just
the
goes
window.
Through the floor. Yeah, it does.
So it is that sense of we are created as people for productivity and for rest. Yeah. And yet actually there's just been so much value in the West on the productivity side, that when we're resting, we don't feel at rest, because there's this feeling of, what am I producing, or why am I not producing? Yeah. And if I'm not producing, then who am I? Yeah. So I suppose I was like, you know, just come into that sense of like that, what did God model out to us in the first place, and why is it so important that we realign with that?
Yeah, it's this pace of rest that he ultimately has created. So it's a theme right throughout Scripture. So the definition of rest is to cease from activity, but not solely to cease from physically doing things, but it's to cease and then be refreshed. Like that's what rest means. So it's more than just stopping. And a lot of the time I speak to people when you talk about doing more, the more I do, the more I am. It's a total myth. So when you stop, it's actually about letting go and getting rid of the need to be in control all the time. So I think that example of the person who works harder, checks their emails, has to do more, it's because they want to feel in control and feel that I'm responsible for producing. Yeah. I'm responsible for the blessing that comes in my life. And that's a total myth, because if you believe that, then you've got to sustain that. Yeah. And to sustain that level, that capacity, that pace, it is relentless. And ultimately, as you say, the performance decreases, the physical stress comes. But there's a different way of doing it. God has this better rhythm, and it is rest. It's always been at the center of how he orders our lives. So God, what you see is he creates the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he stops and he rests. But we've already established that God doesn't get tired.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Yes.
So it's not that he rested because he was tired. He rested to enjoy and appreciate what he'd made.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the pace is we have to rest, pause, appreciate who we are, appreciate who God is, what he's called us for. And as I said with the John Mark Comer quote, realign what's actually important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's almost like if we don't read that right, we go, oh, God rested because his work was complete. And then if we go, well, then we can, I know for myself that I can fall into that trap of going, well, I can rest when I've kind of got everything done that I wanted to accomplish in that day. But actually where we'll fall down is because the enemy will always be saying, but what about that? Well, you didn't quite do that. And it's that sense of missing the mark. And I think we need to get away from that. At times we can put expectations on ourselves that the Lord's never put on us.
That's right.
He's not expecting us to get through this many things. He's not expecting this to be done, but that's that sense of completion. It's recognizing that we are complete already in him.
Yeah.
Doing that extra thing doesn't complete us. Achieving that goal doesn't complete us. We already are complete.
Yeah,
so we can
that's
sit
good.
back and rest.
That's a good point. Yeah, we are already enough. Like God already sees us as complete, and we can enjoy him and his presence without the need to do more. Yeah, that's a good point. And again, I think that does motivate people to do more because they feel that their identity's wrapped up in that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're looking, we've just talked about how God's set the whole thing up, that there's a time when he worked, and then there was a time when he stopped and he paused because he completed his work. And when Jesus came and he, walked the earth, there was so much demand. It's almost like if we think social workers were busy, then
Sure.
we want to have a look at the life of Jesus.
Jesus was
mad
busy.
How did he cope with all of that? And what do we see that he modeled out as he walked? Because he came, wasn't that he operated in supernatural power, but he walked as a man. So he would have experienced tiredness. He would have got weary at times. But, how did he deal with physically feeling exhausted and emotion? Dealing with human emotions.
Yeah, well, he was confined to his body at the end of the day. Still, like he still had the limitations that a physical body has. Jesus, I love this about Jesus. He was always busy, but never rushed. Do you know, there's a real difference. Do you know, you can have so much on your plate, you can have the volume of things that you are doing, but he was never rushed. He was never led by those demands. He was always led by what he felt that his Father had put in front of him, purpose and what he'd called him for. So it's the height of busyness we see in Mark chapter 1. This is, I think that the book in Mark was written for the Romans, and it was action-packed. It was Jesus heals this person, then he does this, then he goes to do this. And the Romans would have loved that. So in the height of busyness in Mark chapter 1, he heals Peter's mother-in-law, and then that evening he heals all the sick, and they all come to him all night. He casts out demons. The whole town is at the door. And then the very next morning, because he heals them all, and the very next morning, they're all still looking for him. But it says very early in the morning, when it was still dark, Jesus gets up, leaves the house, and finds a place on his own to pray. So much so that the disciples then come after him and go, everybody's looking for you.
Where were you?
Like, where have you been?
That's what everyone says to me in my house.
Sure
I
they
try
do.
and disappear for
You're gone
5
for 5
minutes.
minutes, aye.
Just 5 minutes peace, and then all I hear is, where were you? Everyone's
Everything's
looking for you.
falling apart.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, this is what happens. So like they're all saying, where are you? What's going on? Everybody's looking for you. So Jesus has so many demands placed on him. Even after he's already met their needs, they're coming back again.
Yes, it's this constant, no matter how
Constant.
much you try and,
Constant. And he models this life of rest, which is no matter what demands I have, I'm going to start my day, or I'm going to start this time learning from my Father, going on my own and listening to his voice. This model, like, it can't be any clearer than this. It's like Jesus had so many demands, but he wasn't influenced by the demands. That's the difference. I have so many demands in work, but in my weakest moments, I'm influenced by them.
Yeah.
All the things I have to do, all the to-do lists, it's never ending.
And
But
the expectations.
the
we talked about that
expectations,
as
yes,
well.
the expectations of other people,
Yeah.
and the expectations of what other people think I should be doing as well, such as what we have in this story. Everybody's looking for you, but Jesus was never influenced by that. So we have so many options. We are pulled from pillar to post, but the way to do it is to set yourself in those moments, but listening to God first and foremost. That's the model. the model of rest.
Yes.
And he did it, of course,
Yeah.
he did it so well. It's Jesus. But it was incredible, just the impact that it has.
Yeah. Because it's like, what voice are we going to listen to? Because it's often going to be a lot of voices that are shouting, and sometimes we respond to the one that's shouting the loudest.
That's right.
But actually, the Lord always speaks to us in the still small voice.
Yeah.
And for us to be able to hear that, it is that sense of we've got to remove ourselves from all the noise and all the distraction. And it's not that all the voices shouting are bad. Like, my kids can be shouting, and it's right for them to be looking for mum, and it's right for certain people to be coming to me to ask for different things.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm not going to be able to be the best version of myself for those people if I haven't had that time where I can be at rest myself.
You've got to tune your senses to God's voice. So in my former years, I did kickboxing, and I actually man of many talents. What can I say? And I
before
did
the gym, was this before?
This is before the being a gym nerd. Yes. But I did kickboxing, and I did a lot of fights and competitions. And in those moments, you have to tune your senses, not just your physical senses to the fight in front of you, but you have to tune your senses to your coach's voice in the middle of the crowd, because there's loads of people come to watch you, and they're shouting, and the other corner is shouting, and the other coach is shouting. But you've got to tune your senses to your coach, who's then giving you the advice of where to go and where to move. And it's incredibly difficult, but that's where the success is.
Yeah.
And listen to his voice, because he can see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So it's I have to learn that physically, but spiritually that's what we need to do, because the voices aren't going away. You just have to tune your senses to drown them out.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of the demands of life. Life is, as we said, the pace is never ending. It's not going to slow down. Life is not going to slow down. But there's a better way to do it, which is to drown that out, or at least to limit its influence on you.
Yes.
But to hear, like I would with my coach, to be able to hear his voice and drown out everything else.
Yeah. Because I think one of the things that you'd talked about, Adam, when we were doing this in the Bible study, was a quote by Caroline Leaf, which was, "Other people's urgency is not your emergency."
That's a great quote, isn't it?
Isn't it really good?
Yeah.
Other people's urgency is not your emergency, and yet so many times in life that's what happens, isn't it? We have that. We had it this morning in the house because Hope couldn't find something, so then she's yelling at Sophie, "Where's my water bottle? Where's my water bottle? I need my water bottle. Daddy's going," da, 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 and it was just like panic, and it suddenly had to be everybody else's problem.
Yeah.
And but I do that myself. I think we all at times, we panic about things, and then all of a sudden we're pushing that on everybody else. And we've got to at times step back, haven't we? And a water bottle is not a massive situation to deal with, but at times it can be things where we're getting drawn into things. Yeah. And as much as we're trying to keep our life more balanced, we're getting dragged into other people's stuff.
It's the expectations of other people. I love that quote with Caroline Leaf, and whenever you read it there, I thought of families in particular. That's where you get a lot of demands, a lot of expectations of not just little things, but who you should be, the way you should do things, the way that you need to be on a certain day. Everybody expects the way people expected Jesus to do this at this time, when they thought, when they wanted. And for us, it's about finding a pace of life where you learn to say no to that, not to be people pleasers, but to learn to say, what is God directing me to? That's difficult, because you do lose people along the way who don't understand the calling on your life or the purpose that God's put in you. But it's about maintaining those good, healthy boundaries to go, what God has said to me, this is important, and actually what's your urgency isn't my emergency. I'm not going to be necessarily influenced by that. Yes, I'll be around to help and support you, but it's about how you find a better pace to trust what's God telling me first and foremost.
That's fantastic. And there was a great Paul Scanlon quote that you had. Do you want to
Paul
give us
Scanlon,
that one?
I love this quote. I think he says that if you place your emotional home in someone else, you give them the power to make you homeless. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So if you put your emotional security in not just someone, but in somebody else, in a certain situation, in your job, in your success, if you put your security in that, the moment someone disappoints you, the moment someone abandons you, the moment the situation turns sour, you are made emotionally homeless. They have the power. It has the power to evict you.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that is such a powerful statement, because you've got to put your emotional security, the way Jesus did, sets a rhythm and sets a pace of my security is in who God says I am and what he directs me to do. Then you can't be made emotionally homeless.
Yeah.
Or spiritually, in that case.
Fabulous. Well, just to round up here, Adam, I know some people can kind of think, well, you don't understand just the amount of things that I have going on, or almost like the weight that I'm carrying at the minute, and we don't want to make light of some of the difficult situations that people are having to walk through, and the sense of every day just being at times just overwhelmed with just different pressures, or just particularly difficult seasons that somebody's walking through. So what would you say, and what sort of from the word, what verse has kind of helped you to shoulder things, or to not to have to feel like you're under the weight?
Yeah, when I think about rest, and I think about that rhythm of it, it's Matthew 11, verse 28 to 30. It's, come to me, all you who labour, all you who are heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I'm gentle and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. And then Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I love that verse, and I love those verses because it's more than just fluffiness if God makes things light. The context is, as most people will know, people were under the burden of the Mosaic law, under what the Pharisees were saying, which was ultimately, if you work harder, you will then get more of God's blessing, and it's under the burden of the law was the original context. So Jesus comes to completely destroy that view, because the picture is the two oxen. Yes. As one of them who is bigger, larger, more experienced, who then tells and helps the younger one where to go when they're pulling the plough. Yeah. So the imagery is that Jesus, the more experienced, the stronger, he sets the tone. And actually, with the way the harness works, is it's only the bigger and more experienced ox is the one who can set the pace. Brilliant. And if the younger one tries to push or go this way or go at a different pace, they can't move the bigger ox. So Jesus just sits patiently and waits. So the rest, it's brilliant. But when he also doesn't pull us, yes. so that we're running behind him. It's done in tandem with each other. So the imagery is brilliant. So Jesus is saying here, come to me if you're working hard, you feel like it all rests on you. Come to me and learn from me, because this rhythm is not like what the Pharisees had said, which is keep the law, keep the obligations, all the legal things, and God will bless you. He's saying, no, this is totally different. You just walk with me, and that's where the blessings are. That's where life in itself is. So I think that, I understand people have so much going on, and Jesus says, take my yoke upon you. It's easy, the burden is light, so that you're not feeling the weight of it.
Yes.
And I often think about when we make decisions and when we feel we're not at rest, often what we do is I call it fear-based decisions, where we feel that we have to do something, whether it's work or family, or live up to the expectation of somebody, and we feel that we have to do it, because if we don't do that thing, then it's going to go sour. It's not going to work out. We're going to lose this thing in our job, or our health's going to get worse. So we feel the demand pulls us in the direction, and it's a fear-based decision. Yeah. Whereas God doesn't lead us like that. He leads us in peace. Yeah. So you need to be led by peace. So I'm thinking of an example in work. I may feel led by the demand of I must do this thing, because if I don't do this thing, then I'll get overwhelmed, I'll get burdened, the situation for the family may not go well. But the way I look at it, instead of being led by that, I'm led by peace, which is I'm an experienced practitioner, I'm a professional, I'm trusting my intuition, I'll get the time, I'll fix my mind in the right place, and then I make the decision. Yeah. So I understand people have got so much going on, but take a moment like Jesus did, for those who are listening or watching, and operate from that rest. Yeah. He sets the pace, and just find that time, the model, the way Jesus did it. Yeah. And actually that's the way that you operate in rest, and allow that burden just to be lifted from you. Brilliant. Because the result was from the bigger ox. That he was the one who actually was setting the pace, and the success came there. Was
carrying the weight of it all.
Yeah, carried the weight of it all.
Fantastic. And I love, just rounding up here, that learn from me. I think we all, like we were saying at the start, we want these instantaneous results, don't we? We want to just, be able to read that verse, quote it a few times, and then the next day, oh geez, you're just carrying the burden. But actually, I think it is a process that we need to go through, to continually be given those weights over, to be continually saying, Jesus, help me learn from you, because it's probably, and as much as we've learnt to live very busy lives, then learning to adopt a slower pace is probably going to take time. It's going to be something that we have to readjust, realign to, and probably on a daily basis have to continually practice and keep learning, and keep giving things over. And I think what I liked about what you said earlier just is that it is that letting go. Rest is actually about not just stopping, because a lot of people can rest because they stop working, but they don't rest in their minds
right.
because they actually haven't let go.
That's
And
right.
they do all these things to kind of unwind, like, oh, I'll just watch Netflix all night, or we'll go and have a spa day, or we'll do this, we'll do that. But actually that's just distraction, but it's not actually rest.
Before the demands start again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about how you find that pace of rest in the middle of it. As I said, that example of kickboxing, because the demands are there, the voices are there, but you've got to slow down to tune your senses to what God is saying in the middle of it. Spa days are great, sure, love them actually. Become a new convert to spa days.
Oh my word.
Don't know that I should admit that. But
I was going to say,
I absolutely
now
love it.
Andrew knows that.
No
Oh my
shame,
word.
Andrew. Talk about it all you want. I absolutely love them. But again, that's just a distraction, as you say.
Yeah.
You've got to find the pace in the middle of the madness.
Yes, absolutely. Well, listen, we hope you have enjoyed that tonight. Thank you so much, Adam,
Thanks
for
very much.
all of your insights
I loved it.
around beating burnout. And tune in next week for the very final episode
The final episode.
of 10 Reasons Why.
Oh my goodness. We're finishing.
Amazing. For the first season, and then we'll be back. All right, thank you. Hope you've enjoyed it.